The Model Millionaire. When Huey came in, he found Trevor putting the finishing touches to a wonderful life-size picture of a beggar man. The beggar himself was standing on a raised platform in a corner of the studio. He was a wizened old man, with a face like wrinkled parchment, and a most piteous expression. Over his shoulders was flung a coarse brown cloak, all tears and tatters. His thick boots were patched and cobbled, and with one hand he leant on a rough stick, while with the other he held out his battered hat or arm.
"What an amazing model!"
whispered Huey as he shook hands with his friend.
"An amazing model!"
shouted Trevor at the top of his voice.
"I should think so. Such beggars as he are not to be met with every day. A find, my dear, a living Velasquez. My stars, what an etching Rembrandt would have made of him."
"Poor old chap,"
said Huey.
"How miserable he looks. But I suppose, to you painters, his face is his fortune."
"Certainly,"
replied Trevor.
"You don't want a beggar to look happy, do you?"
"How much does a model get for sitting?"
asked Huey as he found himself a comfortable seat on a divan.
"A shilling an hour."
"And how much do you get for your picture, Alan?"
"Oh, for this, I get 2,000.
"Pounds?"
"Guineas. Painters, poets, and physicians always get guineas."
"Well, I think the model should have a percentage,"
cried Huey, laughing.
"They work quite as hard as you do."
"Nonsense, nonsense. Why, look at the trouble of laying on the paint alone, and standing all day long at one's easel. It's all very well, Huey, for you to talk, but I assure you that there are moments when art almost attains to the dignity of manual labor. But you must not chatter. I am very busy. Keep quiet."
After some time, the servant came in and told Trevor that the frame maker wanted to speak to him.
"Don't run away, Huey,"
he said as he went out.
"I will be back in a moment."
The old beggar man took advantage of Trevor's absence to rest for a moment on a wooden bench that was behind him. He looked so forlorn and wretched that Huey could not help pitying him, and he felt in his pockets to see what money he had. All he could find was a sovereign and some coppers.
"Poor old fellow,"
he thought to himself.
"He wants it more than I do, but it means no hansoms for a fortnight."
And he walked across the studio and slipped the sovereign into the beggar's hand. The old man started, and a faint smile flitted across his withered lips.
"Thank you, sir,"
he said.
"Thank you."
When Trevor arrived and Huey took his leave, blushing a little at what he had done, he spent the day with Laura, got a charming scolding for his extravagance, and had to walk home. That night, he strolled into the Palette Club about 11 o'clock and found Trevor sitting by himself.
"Well, Alan, did you get the picture finished all right?"
he said.
"Finished and framed, my boy,"
answered Trevor.
"And, by the by, you have made a conquest. That old model you saw is quite devoted to you. I had to tell him all about you, who you are, where you live, what your income is, what prospects you have."
"My dear Alan,"
cried Huey,
"I shall probably find him waiting for me when I go home. But of course you are only joking. Poor old wretch. I wish I could do something for him. I think it is dreadful that anyone should be so miserable. I have got heaps of old clothes at home. Do you think he would care for any of them? Why, his rags were falling to bits."
"But he looks splendid in them,"
said Trevor.
"I wouldn't paint him in a frock coat for anything. What you call rags, I call romance. What seems poverty to you is picturesqueness to me. However, I'll tell him your offer."
"Alan,"
said Huey seriously,
"you painters are a heartless lot."
"An artist's heart is his head,"
replied Trevor.
"And besides, our business is to realize the world as we see it, not to reform it as we know it. To each his own. And now, tell me, how Laura is?" The old model was quite interested in her.
You don't mean to say you talked to him about her?
Said Huey.
Certainly I did. He knows all about the relentless Colonel, the lovely Laura, and the 10,000 pounds.
You told to that old beggar all my private affairs,
Cried Huey, looking very red and angry.
My dear boy,
Said Trevor, smiling.
that old beggar, as you call him, is one of the richest men in Europe. He could buy all London tomorrow without overdrawing his account. He has a house in every capital, dines off gold plates, and can prevent Russia going to war when he chooses.
What on earth do you mean?
Exclaimed Huey.
What I say.
Said Trevor.
The old man you saw today in the studio was Baron Hosberg. He is a great friend of mine. Buys all my pictures and that sort of thing, and gave me a commission a month ago to paint him as a beggar. What can you do? The fantasy of a millionaire. And I must say, he made a magnificent figure in his rags. Or perhaps I should say in my rags. They are an old suit I got in Spain.
Baron Hosberg.
Cried Huey.
Good heavens, I gave him a sovereign.
And he sank into an armchair, the picture of dismay.
Gave him a sovereign.
Shouted Trevor, and he burst into a roar of laughter.
My dear boy, you'll never see it again. His business is other people's money.
I think you might have told me, Alan,
Said Huey sulkily.
and not have let me make such a fool of myself.